There's one thing I hear people say when sourcing rent-to-rents that instantly kills the deal. And there it is. The cash flow, the opportunity, gone forever. So seriously, do not say this. Just keep it short. Because here's the thing. Landlords and agents want to work with seasoned pros, people that they can trust, people with credibility, so you don't want to sound like somebody that's just set up their limited company yesterday and been to a 2-day course. And here's the best part. Over 1,000 of my mentees have used this exact formula that I'm going to share with you in just a moment to secure over £100 million of rent-to-rent cash flow, and I'm going to give it you for absolutely free. So if you want to source solid cash flowing rent-to-rent deals fast, you need to keep watching. One of the most common phrases that should never be used when sourcing a rent-to-rent deal, okay? Never ever refer to rent-to-rent as rent-to-rent. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, but Simon, isn't it rent-to-rent? Yes, it is rent-to-rent. But here's the thing. You should never ever refer to rent-to-rent as rent-to-rent for two main reasons. Reason number one, most people do not know what rent-to-rent is. All right. So what happens is it's just going to go over their head. Sounds a bit complicated, sounds a bit technical. They just want a normal traditional tenant. So they're just going to bolt. But the second reason is if they have heard of rent-to-rent, you know, that old sort of saying, bad news travels faster than good news. They probably heard about this one case where once upon a time rent-to-rent went wrong, and they're just going to think this is scammy. I don't want nothing to do with it. It's complete ignorance, but that is the reality. So instead, you need to replace rent-to-rent with language that's going to make more sense. Now, not all language is equal. And top tip, you should be using slightly different language for landlords than agents, okay? And I'm going to share with you why in just a few moments. So when you're dealing with landlords, the language landlords are going to really connect with is essentially property management, all right? That's what they are looking for, a property management solution. And therefore, the best way to position ourselves is as a 360 degrees, hands-free property management company. That's going to really resonate with them. And that's the language that they're used to. Because check this out. You don't want to be selling them the concept of rent to rent and then your property management services. The good thing about property management is they're already sold in on that. They don't want nothing to do with it. So all you've now got to do is sell yourself. Now with agents, it's a little bit different. Whenever you are dealing with letting agents, what do you not want to refer to? You don't want to refer to property management because they're just going to think competition. We don't need property management. We are the property managers. So what you need to do with agents is you need to be referring to something we like to call company lets. That's the language that they are going to understand. And that's something that they are used to doing with companies. Okay, they're used to doing. And therefore, once again, you're not selling the concept of rent to rent. You are just selling yourself as a company. So once you've implemented this, what you're going to find instantly is that your communication is going to land way better. You're going to get through the door, you're going to build rapport, and you're going to be speaking their language. Now, secondly, there's so many of you that go to these, these free property courses, 2-3 days stuff, or maybe you watch some YouTube and podcasts and then you just take the property rent-to-rent buzzwords and just insert into every conversation. Now that's a fatal error because the last thing you want to do as a rent-to-renter is just sound like everybody else. So what are some of these buzzwords? Well, the first one I hear a lot of, okay, is guaranteed rent. Of course, there is a place where you want to be referring to this as guaranteed rent. But if you overuse that, it just seems a little bit fishy. So be careful of overusing guaranteed rent. The second one is 3 to 5 years. How many times have you been on a property course or you've been on YouTube and heard people refer to it as 3 to 5 years guaranteed rent? The problem with this is if they saw another renter yesterday and they were also offering guaranteed rent for 3 to 5 years, you sound like a parrot. So it's far better to use something like long-term lets and just keep it open so that you can actually sound original. Another big one that I see a lot of the time is free refurbs. Well, we're going to touch on this more later. However, guys, like, once again, you're just going to sound like everybody else, which is what you want to avoid at all costs because they're just going to see what you're about. Another one is all management and maintenance. So what I would advise you guys to do is rather than using these rent-to-rent buzzwords that everybody else is using, I would come up with spicy alternatives, okay? Or I would be mindful. So for example, rather than 3 to 5 years, let's refer to it as long-term lets or long-term contracts, okay? Rather than all the management and maintenance, why don't you come up with something cool like 360-degree services? They'll be like, oh, what's 360 degrees services? But automatically you sound a bit spicy, a bit different from the crowd. The third thing I would avoid like the plague is never, ever, 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 ever refer to Airbnb on a property viewing or when sourcing a deal. Why? Once again, Airbnb has negative connotations because when you think of Airbnb, you think of parties, you think of people maybe trashing the property, you think of people constantly in and out, disturbing the neighbors, not taking the trash out. So all of a sudden, your prospect is just going to think, this seems a little bit heavy duty. We know the community, we used to live here, we know the neighbors, we don't want this. But here is the thing, in Rent-to-Rent 2.0, guys, okay, sure, we may be using Airbnb, Booking.com, etc. if we're running serviced accommodation, but what we're really looking to do is we're looking to unlock, okay, we're looking to unlock relationships. And in doing so, you're going to actually be attracting a lot of direct clients. Really important. Because if you refer to your tenants or guests as clients and you're really trying to build these relationships, and sure, some things coming from Airbnb, but the majority of our clients are booking on our direct website. They're from our network. We've got an amazing network of contractors that we tap into for my community. Then what happens is it gives a far better first impression to a landlord that might be a little bit more apprehensive about serviced accommodation. And then what it allows you to do is to have a deeper, honest conversation about boundaries they're comfortable with. And then, of course, guys, I always recommend this. We want to aim for long-term tenants. So even if you're doing serviced accommodation, I don't recommend doing 2, 3, 4 night stays. In most cases, we're trying to get the longer term stays because that's where the real money is. Most landlords and definitely most agents want to charge a deposit. And this basically means that if you're taking the property on, they go around and do an inventory, they take pictures of everywhere, and you would typically pay around 5 weeks rent deposit that would be stored in a safety deposit scheme or sometimes internally if it's a company let. And essentially what would happen is at the end of the tenancy, if there's any damage, they would be able to take your deposit. So that gives landlords and agents security. So the last thing you want to do is go to a property viewing and on the first property viewing say, well, we don't pay deposits. No deposits. We don't do it. You're probably wondering why I'm putting on that voice. Well, it's funny. But guys, you just sound a bit, you just sound a bit scammy. You sound like you're cutting corners. You sound like a risky option. So don't say deposits until you get to what I refer to is the close call. All you want to do on this initial viewing, these initial conversations, is be talking about the rent and the term. And I'm going to write that down. All you want to be referring to at the beginning, guys, is you just want to agree on the rent and you want to agree on the term. So let's say 2K for 3 years. That's all you want to be referring to. The deposit will come later down the line. Now, key thing here is if you are asked about deposits, you want to be, big up, expand your chest, okay? And you want to be really assertive and say, we don't do deposits, all right? We don't do deposits. The reason we don't do deposits is because we're investing in your property and we charge our clients a deposit. And it's within our interest to keep your property looking amazing with regular cleans, etc. So it's ready for our clients. So if they ask you, that's your response. But whatever you do, don't be the one that brings up deposits first. There have been many occasions where I've not mentioned the deposits and it's not come up once. Because when I've gone on the close call and I've negotiated all the terms and the specially negotiated clauses, I've just sent a contract that doesn't have a deposit in, and I've very rarely had pushback. Now, there's one caveat here, just so you know. If you are working with an agent, okay, I would say probably 95% of the time, I would be expecting to pay a deposit. That is another reason why it's really beneficial to go direct to the landlord. But if you are working with a letting agent, feel free to pay the deposit and keep it moving, because this deposit might seem expensive, but if you are paying for the link, if you are paying for the relationship that's going to result in multiple more deals, okay, multiple more deals, it may just be worth it. And by the way, guys, I've had agents feed me 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 deals. So if you get the right agent on your side, it can really help you scale. Hope you're getting value from the video. If you're looking to get more rent-to-rent deals, okay, generate more money from the deals that you've got, or perhaps systemize your portfolio to free up your time so you're not giving yourself another day job, go ahead, hit the link below, book a call with me or my team, and let's see if we can help you on your way. Anyway, back to the video. Are you still with me? Yes, of course you are. Great. If that is the case, if you are finding massive value, please hit the subscribe button and enable more and more people to find this amazing free content. Let's dive into the next one. Big one, guys, is a lot of these property courses and webinars and stuff talk about free refurbs. Now, that is not actually technically true in Rent to Rent 2.0. But the next thing you definitely want to avoid saying, guys, is free refurbs. And I'm going to explain. I've never heard anybody talk about this. But the fact of the matter is, guys, in any form of investment, what we want to do is we want to reduce the time it takes us to break even, and we want to increase our return on investment. So in an average rent-to-rent deal, guys, what I usually recommend is we should be breaking even within 6 months. This is one of the reasons, guys, why I really don't recommend using deal sources in most scenarios, because it usually pushes this break even to 12 months, which for me is just too long. I want to break even really quickly. And in most of my deals, by the way, I seek to break even within just 3 months. That is optimum. And I can explain how I do that. One of the main ways I do that is I don't offer free refurbs. Okay? I don't offer free refurbs. Don't get me wrong. There have been times where I have done a refurb for a landlord, but in exchange for something else always. So in exchange for either a preparation period. In exchange, this is a really big one, for a lower rent. My first ever deal, guys, okay, my first ever deal, even though the market rent of the property was £800, I actually only paid £550 per month for the first 12 months to compensate for my additional investment. Well, what did that do? That meant I was flying, okay? Because the monthly cash flow was around £1,400 per month, which meant after 6 months, completely break it even, and then was just smashing the cash flow. So never ever do a free refurb for nothing. You either want lower rent. Another thing I like is you want a longer prep period. Going to talk about that in more detail a little bit later. So we want a longer preparation period where we can really milk the cash flow. Another thing, right, this is really, really key, is if there are any other terms that we want. You know, so I would never do a free refurb on a 2 or 3 year deal. Okay, I would be pushing, if I'm going to do a free refurb, and let's say, for example, it's going to take me, let's say it takes me 9 months to break even. What I then want to do is I want to have a good 5 years so that I've got more time to realize my return on investment. So I'm always asking for something in return. But check this out, guys. Let me share with you a way where you will significantly reduce the amount of times you have to spend your hard-earned cash on somebody else's property. And all you want to do, guys, is when you look at the property and you go for the viewing, you need to ask the landlord, really, 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 really key. You need to ask the landlord what planned works do they already intend to do? Because most landlords in between tenancies have to spend money on their property. The worst thing you can do is go in there and say, well, we do a free cosmetic refurb, 3 to 5 years, guaranteed rent and all the maintenance. Yeah. A, you sound like a parrot, but B, you just signed up for replacing the carpet and painting the walls that the landlord had originally budgeted. I have literally seen landlords rubbing their hands and laughing to their wife because I've just offered to replace a carpet that they were going to. Sure, got the deal over the line, but not rent-to-rent 2.0. Let's do the next one. A big mistake people make is they're so anxious about having what we call a rent-free period that they end up mentioning that too early in the process. So the principle is this, guys. The principle is this. Let's say, for example, this is day 0, okay? And let's just say this is day 90. Okay, so what tends to happen is most rent-to-renters fail because they get the keys, they pay the rent here, then they get the keys. And then what's happening is they then need to use this time to prepare the property. All right, which means that you're paying for a property that you cannot monetize. What I like to do, and this is absolutely key, is I like to get at least 14 days, we'll call this minus 14 days, where I'm able to not only prepare the property without paying rent, but more importantly, I'm able to actually generate bookings. They're pound signs, by the way. I'm able to generate bookings. So by the time I have to pay the rent, well, I've already generated £5,000 worth of bookings. Takes all the stress, all the pressure out of it. But here is the thing. Where do you actually mention this rent-free period? Because most landlords wouldn't want to do that, right? So what we had to do is I developed a contract that really fine-tune this that all my mentees use. And what it means is it basically means that the preparation period. So the first thing, never call it a rent-free period. We call it a preparation period. Okay, I'll just call it prep period because nobody likes giving anything for free. But then also what we then do, guys, which is really, really key, is we talk about the agreed works that they're going to do and we use that as leverage for how long we need. What I mean by that is if they say that they need 10 days to get the EICR done and to do the carpets because you didn't offer to pay for them, then we could just negotiate to get the keys during that period and they're not really losing any money anyway. But whatever you do, you want to mention this when you are negotiating the terms. And this is why I recommend when you're negotiating here, okay, This is when you create the offer, and then this here is where you would negotiate the terms. So you want to separate from when you make the initial offer to when you negotiate the terms. And that's how you can achieve this, guys. Will absolutely change the game, and it will absolutely make sure your cash flow is protected and you can scale up using as little of your own money as possible.